World War II, the war that consumed the world. The world on the edge of the abyss, 1939 to 1941. In September 1939, the world crossed a point of no return. Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland wasn't just the start of a war, it was the final collapse of international diplomacy. In a matter of weeks, cities were wiped out. Entire armies vanished, and millions of civilians found themselves living under military occupation. Europe slid into total war. Men were drafted en masse. Factories stopped making consumer goods and switched to weapons production. Whole populations were forcibly displaced. There was no going back. Between 1939 and 1941, Germany tore through Western Europe at lightning speed. France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark. In many countries, resistance lasted only days or weeks. This was modern war showing its true face. Air raids on cities, endless refugee columns on the roads, nighttime bombings. London began to burn from the sky. Civilians started dying in numbers never seen before. This was no longer a war between soldiers, it was a war against entire societies. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, entire populations were hunted down, deported, or executed. Millions disappeared without a trace. The world still hadn't fully grasped that it was entering the deadliest conflict in human history. Total war and human collapse, 1941 to 1943. In 1941, the war exploded beyond any chance of containment. Germany invaded the Soviet Union, opening the largest battlefront ever seen. Millions of soldiers were thrown into combat across vast territories, facing extreme cold, starvation, and non-stop violence. Battles like Stalingrad turned entire cities into rubble. Soldiers died by the thousands every single day. Many were never buried. This wasn't just fighting, it was industrial-scale death. At the same time, Japan expanded the war across the Pacific. Attacks on military bases, islands, and cities pulled the United States directly into the conflict. The war officially went global. Europe, Africa, Asia, and the oceans all became battlefields at once. Civilians turned into strategic targets. Bombings erased entire neighborhoods. Hunger, disease, and mass killings spread. Concentration and extermination camps operated on an industrial level. Entire groups, Jews, Roma, prisoners of war, political opponents, were systematically wiped out. War no longer had moral limits. The breaking point, 1943 to 1945. By 1943, the Axis powers began to fall back. Germany's defeat at Stalingrad marked the turning point on the Eastern Front. In Africa, Allied forces pushed forward. In 1944, the Normandy landings opened the road to the liberation of Western Europe. But the cost was brutal. Every mile gained meant thousands of lives lost. Cities like Berlin, Dresden, Hamburg, and Tokyo were bombed almost out of existence. Millions of civilians died in the final air raids alone. In the Pacific, battles like Okinawa showed the peak of human brutality. Soldiers fought to the death, civilians were used as human shields, mass suicide became common. In 1945, 2 atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki in seconds. More than 200,000 people died directly or indirectly. Destruction had reached a level never seen before. The war didn't end with relief, it ended with silence and shock. What was left of the world, post-1945? When the war finally ended, the world was barely recognizable. Cities lay in ruins, economies were shattered, millions of orphans, widows, and displaced people were left behind. Europe took decades to rebuild.
Asia carried deep, lasting scars. The psychological damage was just as devastating as the physical destruction. World War II wasn't just a series of battles, it was a global collapse of humanity. Never before had so many people died in such a short time. Never before had technology been used so efficiently to kill. The conflict redrew borders, created new superpowers, and left behind a bitter lesson. When war becomes total, nobody truly wins. World War II officially ended in 1945, but its consequences still shape the world today.
Testimony of a German survivor of World War II. I was 19 when they handed me a uniform. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't a calling. It was a letter, a stamp, an order you didn't argue with. I remember the smell of the new fabric, the stiffness of the wool, the weight of the belt, the cold metal of the buckle. I remember my mother trying to smile while sewing my name inside the shirt, as if that small gesture could keep me safe. I remember my father staying quiet, smoking slowly, staring into nothing, like someone who already saw the future and didn't have the heart to say it out loud. At first, everything looked too organized to be real. Marches, lines, discipline, shouting. From far away, war seemed like a clean machine. But the first train ride east showed me the truth. The wagon was packed with men, some too young, some way too old. A few laughed loudly, trying to act tough. Others stared at the floor, hugging their coats like they wanted to disappear. The train rolled through poorer, colder landscapes. At some stations, children watched us in silence, wide-eyed. At others, women with headscarves stood still, thin and exhausted, like they had already lost something important long before we arrived. When we got close to the front, the air changed. I can't explain it any better than that. It felt like the wind carried rust and smoke. The smell wasn't just gunpowder, it was torn earth, burned wood, and something I only understood later, the smell of death, even when no bodies were in sight. The first night, I didn't sleep, not just fear, tension, like the world itself was wrong, like I had stepped into a place where normal rules didn't apply anymore. The first real artillery fire made me think the sky was falling apart. Training didn't prepare you for that. Out there, the sound hit your chest. You felt it in your ribs and your throat. The ground shook like it was alive, violent, and unpredictable. With every explosion, reality got ripped apart a little more. The trench wasn't just a hole like on the maps. It was a muddy corridor of sweat and exhaustion, slippery boards, freezing water up to your ankles. The cold crawled into your boots and never left. I remember looking at my hands, cracked skin, red and swollen, like I had aged 10 years in a week. Your body was always a collection of small pains, shoulders burning from the gear, lower back wrecked from carrying crates, knees locked from standing too long, and above all, your mind never shutting down. At first, the enemy was just an idea, a direction, a word. Then it became silhouettes, shadows moving between trees. One morning, in the fog, it became a face, a Soviet soldier on the ground, still alive, gasping for air like a fish out of water. He had light-colored eyes, looked about my age. For a second, everything felt insane. I thought about water, about someone back home calling his name. Then someone shouted, and the moment was gone. In war, your heart tries to open, reality slams it shut. Over time, routine becomes a dull knife. It doesn't cut fast, but it wears you down. Days were measured by shelling intensity and ration times, not sunlight. Bread came hard, soup came thin. Meat, when there was any, was a mystery. Hunger isn't just an empty stomach, it's anger, weakness, this low-level rage that turns you into someone you don't like. I saw men fight over a dented can like it was gold. I saw others give away half their food, then cry quietly later, because hunger always comes back. Winter was worse. The eastern winter wasn't cold, it was a force, an enemy that didn't need bullets.
It froze mud, water, fingers. I saw a man take off his boot and find his foot purple, numb, already dead. I saw black fingers, nails falling off. I saw men wishing to get wounded just badly enough to be sent back. When you start hoping for a wound, something inside you is already broken. War also has a sound that never leaves you, collective fear. Not screaming, breathing held too tight, heavy silence. Before an attack, everyone changed. Some prayed, some cracked dumb jokes, like hearing their own voice could protect them. I had a friend, Franz. He carried a photo of a little girl with braids in his pocket. Before an attack, he'd touch it and smile. After, he'd look at it and not smile anymore. One day, he didn't come back, and I was left with a memory that wasn't even mine to keep. After a while, war turns into repetition, shelling, orders, running, falling, silence, screaming. Your body learns to move without asking. You duck before knowing why. You run before knowing where. You obey not because of belief, but because the group moves and you move with it. The unit becomes a current, and if you stop, you drown. I was sent towards Stalingrad when it was still just a name on the map. Later it became a curse. The city wasn't a city anymore. It was a skeleton. Buildings broken like teeth, stairways leading nowhere. The air was always gray, full of dust that turned into a metallic taste in your mouth. We fought for floors, rooms, hallways that would be rubble the next day. That's when I realized modern war had swallowed the idea of a battlefield. Homes, factories, streets, everything was a trench. Stalingrad was hunger and ice, men sleeping sitting up because lying down meant not waking up, wounded soldiers whispering for water in voices that sounded like they came from underground, planes overhead, hope for supplies that often never came. We ate anything, crumbs, flour mixed with water, frozen scraps I couldn't even name. I saw men lose their minds over bread. I saw eyes with no light left, just an animal focus on surviving one more day. Then came the encirclement. At first, people talked about holding out. Then they whispered. Then they stopped talking altogether. It felt like being trapped inside a clock counting down your death. Letters stopped. Supplies vanished. Cold got worse. Artillery sounded closer. One night the sky burned red for hours. Not sunset, but fire, explosions, a whole city turning to ash. I survived because I left before the end. Not bravery, luck, a transfer, an order. I left behind men I never saw again. For years I felt guilty for being chosen. I did nothing to deserve survival. Luck in war is just another kind of cruelty. By 1943 and 1944, we weren't advancing anymore. The word that ruled everything was retreat. Retreat wasn't a maneuver, it was a mindset. You pulled back and looked behind you and saw smoke and ruins and thought, what's left? Roads packed with exhausted soldiers, stuck trucks, dead horses, wounded carried on doors ripped from houses. Retreat had the rhythm of decay. That's when I saw more civilians, and that changes you. Civilians don't wear uniforms. They carry children, suitcases, pots, blankets. I saw families walking through snow with rags wrapped around their feet. Old people collapsing on the roadside when no one stopped because stopping meant dying. I saw a mother rocking a baby like it was alive, even when the face was already too pale. And I thought, what kind of war is this? The answer was simple: total war. War that eats everything. I also saw things I wish I could erase. War makes room for monsters, and not just on one side. I saw cruelty, abuse, people who got used to power and forgot how to be human. Prisoners treated like trash, villages burned, orders no one wanted to question. And the scariest part, how easy it is for normal men to look away. In war, normality becomes anesthesia. People think battle is the worst part. For me, it was the transformation. You start as an individual, then you become a tool, then an animal, then, if you survive, a ghost, because you carry things no one back home understands. How do you explain the sound of a man choking on his own blood, the smell of a burned city, the look of an enemy who's just as scared as you are? When the final collapse came, no speeches could hide reality. German cities were bombed hard. I saw night skies turn into fire, people running with blankets over their heads, buildings collapsing with a sound I'll never forget, a deep roar like the city itself was wounded. War came home, and when that happens, the lie falls apart. There is no far away, the whole world is the front. In the end, there was no victory or defeat, only survival, and survival comes with a strange price. I remember taking off my uniform and staring at my civilian clothes like they belonged to someone else. I looked in the mirror and saw my face, but the eyes belonged to someone who had seen too much. I tried to work, tried to talk, tried to laugh, but something inside me was always delayed, like I was a few seconds behind the rest of the world. People wanted stories, heroes, meaning. I had none of that. I had mud, fear, hunger, guilt, and the names of men no one remembered anymore. I had Franz in the photo of the girl with braids. I had artillery sounds that still showed up on silent nights. I had the habit of waking up suddenly, searching for my helmet, sure the ceiling was about to collapse. And there was the question that never stops.